Oh hey, this is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the LG Gram 15, so named because it's lighter than a kilogram. For those of you who don't speak metric, this is 2.16 pounds. Crazy light, lighter than the Samsung Notebook 9 we recently reviewed. This is a 15.6-inch laptop that weighs that little. Magnesium alloy casing, that's how they do it. It's Intel Core i5 and i7 CPUs, no wimpy Core M's here. 8 gigs of RAM and ample SSD storage, IPS display. We're going to look at it now. Well, it's undeniably a distinctive looking laptop and not too common to see one that's gold. It's beautiful looking, it's clad in metal. There's a black keyboard for good contrast. We appreciate that. Full HD display. You know how it is with these super light ones. You don't get a touch screen though. You don't get high resolution options because, well, it's so thin and so light. It may weigh less than a kilogram and be 0.66 inches thick. That's like 16.8 millimeters at its thickest point. But ports are pretty ample. You can see we have a USB 3.0 and a USB 2.0. I don't know why they didn't just make them all 3.0 ports, but that's a Kensington lock slot on the back. That's not a USB-C port over there. A headphone jack, micro SD card slot on this side. On the other side, another USB 3.0 port, full-size HDMI. That's where you plug the power in, that background connector. A USB-C 3.1 port too. Yay! Okay, let's just get this part over with. I know you folks are fond of accusing almost any laptop of looking like some Apple laptop or other. Often I don't see it. For example, the Dell XPS 13, not to me. Even the Samsung Notebook 9, it has a distinctive side teardrop shape that really kind of sets it apart. In this case, well, if the MacBook Air and the 12-inch MacBook had a oversized baby, it would be the LG Gram 15. Unabashedly, this does look like a Mac clone. So to carry it, you have to be okay being a card-carrying member of the Clone Wars battalion, and you're going to, say, okay, yes, it looks like a Mac, but it's not, and you're going to enjoy a really beautiful design. And that's one thing about being derivative of the Mac. This is a very clean look, obviously. You got the LG logo, the same one your LG refrigerator might have. Imagine that. It's kind of interesting since LG has barely been in the laptop market in the US. We're still getting used to that idea ourselves. The sides taper, not unlike the MacBook Air and the 12-inch MacBook as well. Whereas Samsung does, again, that signature teardrop shape that's purely theirs, this one is pretty much a lot like the Mac. It's also very pretty, and by the way, you're going to have to like gold too, because that's the only color this is available in. They call it new gold. Apparently champagne's a dirty word now, so it's called new gold. It's very pretty, and it doesn't show fingerprints much, so again, no complaints. The hinges on the back, the hinge, really, it's one big long barrel hinge, is pretty robust. We'll talk a little bit about that later. I like this element of the design here where you got the little circle going on. So yes, it's nice looking. It is Mac looking. We'll look at the interior to discuss that. The bottom looks more like your standard PC. Now, here's one thing that doesn't thrill me to death. We have rubber feet. That's not the problem. But we got these little rubber covers over the screw holes that you take the bottom off, and they've got a thick coat of matching gold paint here. So you're probably going to mar the gold paint if you want to pull those out using a pokey tool or your fingernail or something like that. And in fact, we didn't open it up. You know how I always open these up to show you the guts, but we didn't because we didn't want to mar our review unit. Oh well, sorry about that, folks. But inside, I can tell you that RAM is soldered on. It has an M2 SSD. That's the usual 2280 form factor. Don't know if the wireless card is socketed or not. My guess is yes. I think only Samsung integrates them into the motherboard, but can't promise that. Now, opening it up, the Mac-like resemblance continues. We got the little cutout to make it easy to open the lid. You can pretty much open the lid with one hand. Black keys with contrasting white letters. A good idea there. We're glad they're not HP and just trying to have everything be all silver, and then you can't really see the masking on the keys. This is not a backlit keyboard. I don't know why. I can't imagine that LEDs use that much power or take up that much space, but Samsung and their competitor, those crazy Koreans, are going at it with each other with the two lightest laptops on the market. The 15-inch Samsung Notebook 9 does not have a backlit keyboard either, but their 13-inch does. Go figure. Anyway, no backlighting here. If that ruins your day, oh well, bye-bye. Go grab a latte and check out our next video. Notice the hinge is pretty robust. Notice this camera. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's a casualty of the no bezel design, or really it's a 1/4-inch bezel. It's teeny tiny. So you people who love the Dell XPS look, Well, it's starting to appear on other models here, and just like the XPS 13, you're suffering with the same chin cam down here. So you're never going to look really good. Not because the 1.3 megapixel webcam isn't good, it's fine actually, but you're always going to be caught under the chin, or you're going to be holding your laptop up at strange angles and waving at your face, which I suppose you could do because this is so light. Okay, we couldn't resist a little gold on gold action here, so at least they didn't copy the exact hue that Apple uses. Theirs is a little bit more bronzy looking. The keyboard, I just want to say that I had preconceptions. I thought this was not going to be a good keyboard. The key travel is low, you know, that sort of thing. It's really very good to type on. I enjoyed it quite a lot. I typed as accurately on this as I do on any of the other laptops that I have that supposedly have wonderful keyboards, like the 15-inch MacBook Pro, the ThinkPad X1 Yoga Carbon laptop. You get the idea there. It's pleasant to type on. The number pad being so tightly spaced there is no gap between the number pad. Well, first off, it's nice to have a number pad. That's pretty much a rarity on Ultrabooks, and 15-inch laptops don't even always get them, and so you can't complain, oh, there's wasted space, I could have had a number pad. Well, guess what? They put it in here. It's a little tight, so you're probably going to hit some of those keys by accident at first, but once you get used to it, it's fine. One thing that I don't love, and this is a matter of personal preference, you might love this. Some people like to have the trackpad dead centered in the middle of the machine. Some people like to have it centered under the spacebar. I like it centered under the spacebar person, but that's not really a hugely important complaint there. The trackpad is likewise extremely pleasant. Didn't make me want to run to the 15-inch MacBook Pro. This is an Elan trackpad. They've improved a lot. I remember when Asus used to use them in some of their laptops, and it was just absolutely hard. Not so anymore. Nice smooth glass trackpad, very predictable, very controllable, becomes kind of an extension of your brain, which is a good thing because there is no touchscreen here. Supports gestures. You've got the Elan control panel on it. The only thing that I thought was a little weird is the two-finger tap to right-click was not enabled by default. They had assigned it to middle-click. Who uses middle-click? What does middle-click even do? I don't even know. But anyway, you can change that easily enough in settings, so it does that. It's a little... it's audible, but not really that loud, and it's not that stiff. I know at the Gram 14, some folks found that one too stiff. This one is not. I think it's just right, as Goldilocks would say. Now, some reviews, at least for previous Gram models, have complained that the lid bounced around. This is a stiff hinge. When I type on it, it doesn't go bouncing anywhere. It's not a convertible, so you don't have to worry about tapping the screen. There's no touchscreen. In fact, again, with these super thin and light laptops, they don't have touchscreens because they weigh more and they consume more power, but mostly they weigh more and they're a little bit thicker. Anyway, the hinge on this one is nice and stiff and feels like quality stuff. Despite the thin magnesium alloy here, I can't deform the keyboard deck. I can't twist the base. It's pretty firm. If you tried really hard, you probably could, but you'd be using more force than anybody in their right mind would anyway with your nice piece of high-end consumer electronics. The lid, however, this reminds me of the old Sony Vaios that were carbon fiber, the high-end models that were the lightest they could possibly make. Using very thin and light materials means there is more flex. Now, these things are designed to flex without breaking, but still, if you find this disconcerting, whee, you see that? This is not the laptop for you. This is the price we pay for cutting it down to 2.2 pounds. In fact, LG Korea's website had a video with a paper artist who made a paper replica of this, complete with the little internals of the motherboard, all have little pieces of paper. Weighed it on the scale, it weighed the same as this. Now with the display, there's some really good news and there's some not as great news, but nothing is bad here. This is a non-touch display. Once again, go grab that latte and catch the next video if you absolutely must have a touch screen. With a 15.6-inch laptop, even though this one is very compactly built in all dimensions, I don't find I have as much of an urge to go and reach for the screen, so I haven't been absolutely weeping so far. You might though, you might. So this is a 1920 by 1080 display. Again, for these super light laptops, that's pretty much standard fare to save on power. No 4K, no 2K options here. It's an IPS display though, and LG makes lovely monitors and TVs, so we expected good stuff here. And my first reaction when I looked at this was, wow, nice display. And I'm pretty picky about that, and I evaluate a lot of displays, and believe me, I am very sensitive to color. But as it turns out, the color gamutt's actually falling a little bit behind the $1,000 and up pack. As you can see there, 83% of sRGB and 65% of Adobe RGB. Could have fooled me, couldn't tell from looking at it. It looked like your usual 95 sRGB and 75 Adobe RGB. There's that. Color calibration out of the box is very good on this. Barely any change had to be made using our colorimeter, which also we use to measure this stuff here. Experientially, as you can see, this is a duck wallpaper we use all the time. This looks pretty darn nice. Contrast is 680:1, which is good. Black levels are pretty typical, around 0.4 at maximum brightness. There's also a reading mode, which if you hit the FN and F9 keys will make the display really more yellow. Basically, it's cutting back on blue light. That's for use indoors at night in low light, and it's supposed to be easier on your eyes, maybe even help your brain go to sleep at night. And I'll turn it on just so you can see it. So there it is. Our ducks just got a little dingy looking, but honestly, if you're using this at night in dim lighting like I do in the living room when I write reviews at night, it is pretty restful. And in fact, it's likely hooking into the ambient light sensor because it notices if I'm going into a fairly dark or warmly lit room, and it reminds me, turn reading mode on. Poor LG, their competitor, keeps sneaking in here. I just have to mention, though, that the Samsung Notebook 9 also has a glossy, non-touch 1080p display, but it's less reflective. They did a really good job of avoiding reflections. This one is pretty average in terms of reflections. They do get back points, though, for the black bezel over here. Samsung goes with silver all around, and it just makes the bezel stand out, whereas when it's black like this, it can just disappear. Now, this is no quad-core powerhouse Ultrabook. I mean, pretty much obviously, anything that is this thin and this light, it's 0.66 inches thick, is not going to have dedicated graphics or a fancy quad-core CPU. It's still fine for playing things like Civ at 1920 by 1080 resolution. You can see here is Civ 5, with graphics settings on high. And you can hear the speakers there. The sound is actually fairly natural and full, but not real loud. It is a skinny laptop. The laptop's available in two configurations. I would lean towards the lower end configuration because it is considerably less expensive. The 1099 model has an Intel Core i5. This is Skylake generation. These are dual-core 15-watt Ultrabook CPUs with Intel HD 520 graphics inside. So you can get the Core i5 or you can go ahead and get the Core i7 that's in the 1499 model. Both of them have 8 gigs of DDR3L RAM, and that's soldered on board. You can't upgrade that. And the Core i5 is 256 gig SSD in an M2 slot. The Core i7 has a 512 gig SSD. That's pretty ample there. Now, both of these are using SATA 3 interface, and I'll show you the Crystal Disk Mark scores. Despite that, the scores are actually a little better than average for SATA 3 interface. So here's the Crystal Disk Mark score, and again, that's a little bit better than the SATA 3 average, too, considerably better. Not PCIe fast like the Dell XPS 13 or something like that, but it's fine. It's absolutely fine. And here's our PC Mark 8 home accelerated score of 3092. This is the Core i7 model. So that's pretty typical for this class of machine, the Ultrabook class of machine. It competes, say, with the HP Spectre X360 15-inch, other than not being a convertible design. That sort of machine, it is not going to compete with a gaming laptop with the quad core there. One thing I will say is this surprisingly has single channel RAM, not dual channel. Dual channel has pretty much become standard for the past year and a half, so that lowers the performance just a little bit. Here's our Geekbench 3 score, 2903 for the single core, 6414 for the multi-core. A decent competitive, puts it right in the middle of the pack, which is actually fairly impressive given how thin and light this is. And despite it being so thin and light, it does not get hot or loud. When I was playing Civ for an hour to get that game going for you to see, you could hear the fans. They were not very loud, or fans, singular, excuse me. The bottom does not get too hot. It does not exceed human body temperature. It gets close in this section right here, where obviously the CPU must be. This area right here, I mean exactly this area here, is the hottest point. If you're doing like something like playing Civ 5 or Skyrim on this, which is about all it can handle. This is not for playing The Division or Fallout 4. This spot will reach 110 degrees Fahrenheit. The keys over here will reach about 100. Anything over body temperature we perceive as being kind of toasty. It's still not bad, and the place where you keep your hands right here stays very cool, room temperature cool. So that's pretty impressive. Now, so you can get an idea of the size comparison, the Dell XPS 15 is on the left. It's one of the most compact and in fact, one of the most lightweight among 15-inch machines. Whether they be dual-core or quad-core, it's quite light. You can see a similar size. The LG, of course, is going to be skinnier, particularly at the front end where it tapers, whereas the Dell's pretty closer to a constant thickness throughout. Now, the amazing thing here is that it would take two LG Gram 15s to weigh as much as one Dell XPS 15, and the Dell XPS 15 is an impressively light 15-inch laptop with a metal frame, just like the LG. We're talking half the weight here. The shipping box with the charger and everything for the LG Gram weighs as much as just the Dell XPS 15 by itself. The LG Gram 15 ships with that compact and very light charger that you see there with plenty of cord length, none of those funky designs with short cords, so it's practical for those of you who do have to travel on business. Also included in the box is that USB-C to gigabit Ethernet adapter that you see sitting on top of the laptop right now. That's a full USB-C 3.1 port. It's not hobbled in or anything like that. Not Thunderbolt 3 though, but it's just USB-C Gen A. So what you got there is something that can do Ethernet. It can do some multifunction adapters. It can do a USB-C to DisplayPort. You don't need USB to HDMI because it already has HDMI built in. So you've got the ability to do stuff with it. Is it going to work with something like the Core graphics amplifier from Razer whenever that thing finally releases? I don't know. I think a lot of manufacturers don't even know yet because they don't have any external USB-C graphics amplifiers. But I can tell you one thing, that Core requires Thunderbolt 3, so that's going to be out. But if we see USB-C graphics augmenters, whatever you would call them, it's a possibility. I wouldn't count on it. Right now, USB-C is kind of a muddle. So battery life must absolutely, you know that word that starts with S and ends with K. The LG Gram 14 kind of got dinged at the end of last year for having fairly short battery life. The LG Gram 13 was not an Energizer bunny either. Of course, LG's had some time to kind of perfect the design here with the 15, plus they have a bigger chassis to put a larger battery in. They're still obviously trying to keep the weight down though. So we have a 35 watt-hour battery. That's not real high capacity. Typically we see 45 to 55 watt-hour in Ultrabooks. But the power management in this is pretty good without actually throttling the device. And battery life with average productivity use or streaming 1080p video is around 6 hours. So in the 15-inch category of laptops, especially because some of them are quad cores with dedicated graphics that are going to eat more power, that's not so bad. It's not stellar, but it's not horrid either. Sorry, LG. But once again, the Samsung Notebook 9 15-inch should run for about an hour longer on a charge though. But you know what? Samsung has some tricks up their sleeve. Slightly larger battery, 39 watt-hour, and also a slightly smaller display. Theirs actually is 15 inches, whereas this one is 15.6 inches. So there you have it. The future is here right now. I think all of us would love to have a laptop this light. If you're okay with the concessions, the battery life is passable but not stellar on this. There's flex in the lid that's going to be inherent to a thin and light design until somebody invents a whole new kind of alloy. If Apple made this, it would be considerably heavier. It would be more rigid, knowing Apple, but it would be heavier. So there it is, the trade-off of what you want. That's why this is available. You can go with something like the 12-inch MacBook or the MacBook Air or any other competitor that's stiffer if that's more important to you than weight. This is available for those of you who prefer the lightness of the machine. The machine is really gorgeous looking, honestly. Like I said, unless you got something against gold, it has quite a nice selection of ports as well, including USB-C 3.1 on it. It's powerful, it's strong enough to be your main machine. There's really a lot to like here. Now in some ways the Samsung Notebook 9 15-inch might have out-engineered them a little bit when it comes to battery life, but I think this is certainly the prettier one, and this weighs 2.2 pounds while the Notebook 9 15-inch weighs 2.9 pounds. We gotta hand it to LG, you know, it's pretty impressive stuff. So that's the LG Gram 15. With each iteration, the Gram seems to get both larger, but not any heavier, and better. This is not something you're going to develop muscles by carrying around. Certainly, it's trivially light. And if you're in the market for the lightest possible laptop you can get, or you wanted a 15-inch laptop, but you just found them too heavy, so you were compromising going to 13 inches, this could be worth a look. Of course, Samsung's Notebook 9, there's also a 15-inch of that, and that one's worth considering as well. Arguably, this is the prettier one as long as you're okay with gold, but it's also a little bit more expensive than the Samsung too. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.